I thought asking for an open marriage would give me freedom. I told myself I needed something new, something honest, something real. He agreed without a fight. No questions, no anger, just calm. I thought that meant he loved me. I thought it meant trust, but it wasn't trust. It was a setup. And by the time I realized what he was doing, the door had already opened, and the one man I never wanted him to meet was standing on the other side, and my husband was the one who let him in. I told him I wanted to try open marriage on a Thursday night, right after we finished eating dinner. He was rinsing plates, humming something low, and I just said it calmly, clearly, like I was asking if he wanted to switch to almond milk. He froze for a second, then turned around with a half smile, half frown that told me he thought it was a joke. When I didn't laugh, the plate in his hand made a soft click as he set it down. Are you serious? He asked. I nodded. He didn't get angry. He didn't yell. That wasn't his way. He was calm. Always calm. He asked why. I said I'd been thinking about it for a while. I said we were still young. I said the world was changing, and so were we. I said all the modern things about honesty and experience and not owning each other's bodies. I had it rehearsed, all the little phrases that make it sound like freedom instead of fracture. He said he'd think about it. What I didn't say is that I already had someone in mind. It hadn't started physically. Not yet. Just long conversations with a man I'd met at a photography class 6 months earlier. He wasn't my type, but he made me laugh in this sharp, unexpected way. He asked questions my husband never thought to ask. Not because my husband was cold or careless, but because he already thought he knew me. After so many years together, he'd stopped being curious. This other man didn't assume anything. He made me feel new, like someone worth rediscovering. So, yes, when I brought up the open marriage, I did it with my mouth full of principles, but inside, I was already somewhere else. When my husband finally said yes 2 weeks later, I pretended to hesitate. I nodded slowly, like it was something we were building together, like I was afraid too. But the truth is, I was already halfway out the door. The first time I was with the other man, I told myself it wasn't cheating. That was the whole point. We'd agreed. We'd set rules. We'd talked. But as I lay in his bed afterward, staring at the crack in the ceiling, I felt something I didn't expect. Not guilt, not shame, but relief. Like something I'd been holding underwater for years had finally come up for air. Back home, things didn't fall apart. That was the strangest part. My husband was kinder than ever. He asked how I was doing. He made dinner. He left little notes in my bag. And I wondered, was this real? Or was he pretending not to feel anything just to win? I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. A month passed. Then, too, I was still seeing the other man. Nothing serious, I told myself. No expectations, just breathing room. But breathing turned into needing. We started going away on weekends. He bought me earrings. I wore them at home and said they were from a boutique downtown. My husband smiled and said they looked nice on me. I hated how easy it was to lie. Then one night, over wine, my husband told me he'd met someone too. I smiled, nodded, said all the right things. That's great. I'm happy for you. Tell me about her. He said she was younger, adventurous, a little wild. He said she made him feel spontaneous again. I asked him if they'd slept together. He said yes. I asked him if he liked her. He said, not like I like you, but enough. I didn't expect it to hurt, but it did. A deep, burning twist in the stomach I didn't know was still there. I told myself this was fair. This was balance. I'd opened the door. I couldn't be angry that he walked through it. But when I went to bed that night, I stared at the ceiling again. Only now, the crack was in my own house. I kept telling myself this is what I asked for, that everything happening was my idea, that this was modern, adult, healthy, but nothing about the way I lay awake that night felt modern, or adult, or healthy. It felt like being hollowed out from the inside, slow and steady, by something I couldn't name but had personally invited in. He didn't flaunt her, he didn't throw it in my face. He still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still sent me texts at lunch with dumb memes and thinking of you. But now I read them differently. I started wondering who he had just seen, who he was texting after, what her name looked like on his phone screen. I began checking his cologne, watching how long he stayed in the shower, listening to how often he checked his watch. And still, I smiled. Still, I said I was fine. Still, I played the part of the woman who could handle the weight of her own decisions. But something shifted. The other man, the one I thought I wanted, began to feel smaller. Not in stature, but in presence. He started asking more of me. Where were you last night? Why didn't you reply? Do you still think about him when you're with me? I hated those questions, not because I didn't have answers, but because they reminded me I was building a second life out of borrowed hours and half truths. I didn't want obligations from someone who wasn't supposed to matter. I wanted escape. I wanted contrast. I wanted silence without guilt, not new conversations about whether I cared enough. Meanwhile, at home, things were too calm, too kind. My husband never missed a beat. He didn't act cold or distant. If anything, he became more thoughtful. He cooked more. He initiated more. He asked me to watch old movies with him like we used to. He brought home wine and put on records. At first, I thought he was trying to win me back, but slowly, I realized he wasn't fighting at all. He was preparing to let go. That was worse. It came through in the small things. How he stopped asking where I'd been, how he didn't mention her anymore, how his eyes, once soft when they looked at me, had become steady, unmoving, like someone memorizing the details of a painting they planned to leave behind. I started picking fights, stupid ones, about towels left on the floor or the way he folded shirts. He didn't engage. He'd apologize, or nod, or walk away. It felt like screaming into a void. One night, I told him I wanted to take a break from the openness. He said okay, just like that. No pushback, no questions, no protest, just okay. And somehow, that shattered me more than if he had argued. I stopped seeing the other man, not with a bang, just with silence. I stopped answering. He got the message. Or maybe he was tired too. Days passed, then weeks. My husband and I drifted into something I couldn't describe. Not cold, not warm, just still, like the space between breaths. Then one Friday evening, he came home early, said he had a surprise. He'd booked a weekend trip. Just the two of us. A cabin, wine, nature, no phones. I smiled. My voice sounded cheerful. My hands trembled the whole time I packed. The drive was quiet, not uncomfortable, just sparse. He asked if I wanted music. I said no. We watched trees blur past the windows. I wondered if this was our version of trying again, or his way of saying goodbye. The cabin was perfect. Wood panels, big windows, a fireplace. He made dinner. We laughed about something small, and for a moment it almost felt like we'd found our way back. But I was still waiting, waiting for the other shoe, waiting for the question, waiting for the moment where he'd say, tell me the truth. Instead, he poured two glasses of wine and said, I invited someone to join us. At first, I laughed. Then I saw his face and realized he wasn't joking. I set the wine glass down too hard. It didn't break, but the sound cut the air. I stared at him, waiting for a smile, a wink, some signal that this was part of some weird joke or awkward attempt at reviving something between us. But his face was still calm. He sipped his wine, then looked at me over the rim of the glass and said again, slower this time, I invited someone to join us. I asked, Who? Even though I already felt the answer unfolding in my stomach. He stood and walked toward the door without speaking, and when he opened it, I felt my entire body freeze. It was him, the other man, the one I thought I had left behind, the one I stopped answering, the one I thought was a private secret folded into the corner of my mind. And yet, there he was, standing at the threshold of the cabin, wearing a dark button down, holding a bottle of wine and a perfectly neutral expression. He stepped inside slowly. My husband gestured for him to sit. I didn't move. I couldn't speak. My husband looked at me and said, You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. But I thought, since you once wanted him, and you once wanted this kind of freedom, we should experience it together. I whispered, Why are you doing this? He said, Because I need clarity. Because you asked for honesty, for freedom, for permission, and I gave it. But I never got mine. The air felt thick, too quiet. The fire cracked behind me. I could hear the bottle cap twist open, hear the second glass being filled. The other man didn't speak. He just sat, watching. And in that moment, I realized the dynamic had changed. I wasn't the one in control. I wasn't the one setting the rules anymore. I was standing in a room that had been arranged without me, for me, and around me. And no matter what I chose, I had already been chosen. My husband walked over, stood inches from me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch me. He just said, I need to see who you really are when nothing's stopping you. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't even revenge. It was something colder. It was a mirror. What happened next wasn't chaos. It wasn't shouting or glass breaking or tears. It was quiet, almost ritualistic. 3 glasses of wine, a long silence, a moment where no one moved first. And then something gave way. I can't explain it all without stepping outside of words YouTube would allow. So I'll say this. There was no violence. There was no force. There was only surrender to confusion, to heat, to exposure. And afterward, I didn't feel free. I didn't feel loved. I didn't even feel seen. I felt dismantled. I took a long shower, alone, sat on the edge of the tub while water ran cold. My thoughts didn't come in full sentences, just fragments. What was that? What does it mean? Who am I now? When I came out, the cabin was empty. The other man was gone, his glass still on the table. My husband was outside, stacking wood. He didn't look at me when I stepped onto the porch. He just said, Now we're even, and I don't owe you anything anymore. I asked, Was this your plan all along? He paused, then said, No, but you gave me the blueprint. That night, we slept in the same bed, back to back. Neither of us touched the other. And I knew this wasn't reconciliation, this was resolution. We didn't talk on the drive home. No music, no questions, just the road unspooling in front of us like a straight line to the inevitable. I looked out the window and tried to count trees, then cars, then regrets. None of it helped. When we pulled into the driveway, he turned off the engine and sat there a moment before saying, You can keep the house. I'll stay with my brother for a while. I opened my mouth to protest, not because I wanted him to stay, but because I hadn't expected the finality to sound so calm. He packed 2 bags, took his suits, a shaving kit, a few books. I stood in the doorway like a stranger, watching a tenant move out. When he was done, he kissed me on the forehead like someone closing a chapter. I wanted to scream, or beg, or collapse. But all I did was whisper, Is that it? He paused. What more is there to say? Then he left. I waited 2 weeks before I opened the email. The subject line was blank. The message was short, just a link. I clicked. It was a shared folder. Inside, screenshots, messages, timestamps, a voice recording, Photos I didn't know were taken. I stared at the screen for an hour. Then I called him. He picked up on the third ring. I know what you saw, he said. Then why send it? I asked. Because I wanted you to know I didn't act blindly. I gave you every chance to tell me the truth. You wanted openness. I gave it to you. All of it. Even the part where I opened myself to the reality you were too afraid to face. I couldn't breathe. Did you ever love me? I asked. He said, Of course. I just stopped recognizing the person I loved. There was no fight, no drawn out emails. He filed the divorce papers a month later. No property battle. No mutual friends getting caught in the middle. Just signatures, a clean severing of two lives that had once promised forever. I moved back into my own silence. Different now, not the stillness of boredom, but the kind that echoes. The man I'd seen on the side disappeared, of course, whether by design or shame or instruction, I never knew. He stopped responding, deleted his socials, vanished as if he'd only ever existed for the role he was hired to play. I kept wondering, was any of it real? Did he ever feel anything for me? Did I? But the questions didn't help. They never do. One night, months later, I walked past a restaurant where my husband and I had our 10th anniversary. I peeked through the window like a ghost, wondered if he'd ever take someone else there, if he already had. I thought about messaging him, just to say I was sorry. But then I remembered something he said right before leaving. Apologies are only valuable if they come before the consequences. I deleted the message before I wrote a single word. Sometimes I think I ruined everything. Sometimes I think we both did. But mostly I think I tried to control a story that didn't want to be written the way I wanted, and he just finished it for me. People say open marriages are about honesty, about freedom, about evolved love. But what they don't tell you is that once you open a door, you can't control who walks in or out. And sometimes, the moment you hand your partner permission to see other people is the moment they start seeing you clearly for the first time in years. And sometimes they don't like what they see.